We're on the 9th day of Diddy's trial. The Manhattan courthouse, now transformed into the epicenter of one of the biggest bombshells ever dropped on the music industry, was halted once again. The hearing had already heard explosive testimonies from names like Cassie, Will Smith, and Monique. But in that specific instant, something no one expected happened. The doors opened, and without fanfare, Ice Cube entered. The atmosphere changed immediately. He wasn't there seeking the spotlight. No press was waiting for him. He walked in with a resolute stance, carrying a folder in his hands. Inside it, evidence, names, audio recordings, documents, connections that, in seconds, silenced even the most skeptical among those present. That's when the court understood. This was no longer just about Diddy. What Cube was about to reveal was a mechanism, a silent but brutal machine. This wasn't about fame or money. What was at stake was control. A system built to protect those in charge, silence those who question, and eliminate those who don't obey. A cycle where success is offered as bait, but once you're in, you either play the game or you're discarded, and not just forgotten, erased. For years, names were whispered behind the scenes: Jamie Foxx, Oprah Winfrey, Quincy Jones. But now, the whispers came with proof, and the one bringing it all to light was Ice Cube. The courtroom erupted into chaos for a moment. Cameras flashed, Diddy's lawyers hastily exchanged papers, and then, total silence. Ice Cube walked to the center of the room like someone who had rehearsed this moment for decades. His gaze was fixed, his expression hard. The impact was immediate. Jurors shifted in their seats. The judge paused for a second, visibly surprised. And Diddy, realizing who had just entered, lost his composure. Cube broke the silence. "I wasn't invited. I came because I wanted to." The judge nodded, and with that, Ice Cube began to speak. But it wasn't the artist standing there. It wasn't the movie star or the rapper. It was a man who had been carrying truths for a long time. He looked directly at the jurors and said, "Some of you didn't even know it, but I was never part of their circle." And that's what stung the most. The courtroom froze. The atmosphere shifted. What was to come next wasn't just revealing. It was devastating. Cube began by exposing what everyone pretends not to see. The club, a select group in the entertainment world, discreet but supremely influential. People who smile on red carpets but make decisions in the shadows. Executives, entrepreneurs, public figures. And according to Cube, they don't accept you out of kindness. They test you, they mold you, they control you. If you refuse to follow the script, he said, looking directly at Diddy, meetings get canceled, false stories appear, rumors emerge from nowhere, and calls you never answer change your life. Cube claimed to have seen it happen countless times. Talented people being recruited, manipulated, seduced with promises, and when they resisted, they disappeared. And Diddy, he continued, wasn't just another member of the club. He pulled the strings. The court was spellbound, jurors leaning forward, hanging on every word. Even the judge seemed to be slowly digesting what he was hearing. He asked if Cube wanted a break. He refused. And then he said, "You know why I'm here? Because they tried to destroy someone I admire, Jamie Foxx." And that's when everything began to escalate. A new name, a new layer. Cube revealed that Jamie had always been a target. The approaches came disguised. Friendly invitations, exclusive parties, messages from people he never imagined had his number. All smiles on the outside, but with ulterior motives. Jamie was brilliant. His talent made them uncomfortable, and that's precisely why they approached him. First came the praise, then the favors, and then the control. Cube said Jamie had sought him out in secret, speaking carefully, fearfully. "They treat you like family," Jamie had allegedly said, "but only if you follow the rules." Then came the backstage access, the basketball game parties, the blacked-out SUVs, the confiscation of cell phones, the mysterious guests. According to Cube, it wasn't just entertainment. It was observation, selection. They wanted to know who would submit, who would question, who would stay silent. Jamie maintained his composure. polite, professional, but never fully committed. And that's when the narrative about him began to shift. Suddenly, he was difficult. His health became a topic. His name disappeared from major productions and appeared in the worst possible places, tabloids and conspiracy theories. Cube was direct. That health crisis in 2023, that was no coincidence, it was a message. And more than that, it was retaliation. But he didn't stop there. He claimed Diddy's circle didn't just organize events, they recorded everything. Hidden, cameras, files created, folders maintained. The guests didn't know, but they were being watched. And in a call Jamie made to Cube after one of these encounters, he couldn't explain what he saw. He only said one phrase, "I can't talk about it, but I also can't forget it." Silence gripped the room until Cube dropped another bombshell. Oprah wasn't just Puffy's friend, he said. This goes deeper. According to him, right after Jamie was crowned with an Oscar for Ray at the peak of his career, he received an unexpected call. It was Oprah. But it wasn't to congratulate him, it was a warning. She said he was losing his way, that he needed to fall in line, and that she would introduce him to someone who would help him find himself. That someone was Quincy Jones. Cube didn't need to explain who Quincy was. Everyone there knew. An icon, but feared behind the scenes. Oprah took Jamie to Quincy's house, but what seemed like a mentorship meeting turned into something else. Jamie described that night as strange, uncomfortable. It didn't feel welcoming. It felt like indoctrination. It was like training, he allegedly said. It wasn't help, it was preparation. Cube concluded that Jamie never managed to put into words what he saw, but the look in his eyes when he tried said it all. And in that courtroom, no one had any doubts. Something much bigger than Diddy was being revealed. And that was just the beginning. Quincy called it legacy, but what he delivered was a leash disguised as an opportunity. Ice Cube's words hung in the air like heavy smoke. The courtroom, until then tense, now seemed paralyzed. According to him, after that encounter with Quincy, Jamie Foxx didn't change because he wanted to. He changed because he had no choice. The only way to survive in this game, Jamie once told him, is by faking it. And Cube claimed to have seen his friend faking it for years. Faking that he was okay. Faking that nothing bothered him. Faking that this was normal. But there, before the jury, no one was faking anymore. Cube leaned back in his chair, serene, firm, and let it out. Quincy Jones isn't just a producer. He's the godfather. The room froze. He looked directly at the judge. This isn't gossip. It's the truth. And it needs to be on the record. He described Quincy as someone the public applauded, but who, behind the scenes, sent shivers down spines. You don't reach that level of power with talent alone, Cube said. You get there with trades. And I'm not talking about music contracts. I'm talking about exchanges of souls. According to Cube, the meeting between Jamie and Quincy wasn't coincidental. It was a carefully orchestrated handover. Jamie told me, that wasn't guidance. It was indoctrination. They disguised it as mentorship, but Jamie felt the truth. It was like being processed, as if they were molding something in me, not helping. And the darkest part, Jamie wasn't the only one. Cube said he'd heard almost identical stories from other men, artists who shone briefly and then disappeared without explanation. Some collapsed in public, others reappeared, unrecognizable. Quincy can use charm as a mask, Cube declared, but the message behind it is the same as Diddy's: obey or disappear. And then came the heaviest blow. Cube said he saw photos, private, secret photos, exchanged behind the scenes of the industry. Images that should never have existed. In all of them, Quincy was there, smiling, but the other people in the photos weren't smiling. I can't confirm everything, he admitted. But I can confirm this. Quincy isn't just a mentor. He's an intermediary. And who's above him? We don't even know their names. Cube then sat up a bit straighter, his voice firm as stone. You want to know how they keep you quiet? It's not just fear, it's blackmail. Diddy's weapon, according to him, wasn't money, it was secrets. Recordings, files, videos, things collected over decades. Parties, hotels, private jets, studios, everything cataloged, everything saved, everything ready to be used. They don't invite you to parties, Cube said, looking at the prosecutors. They invite you to traps, and they record you in them. Turned to the jury. You want to know why so many stayed silent? Ask how many received a USB drive at home. How many answered calls from a blocked number, listening to audio they didn't even remember saying. Ask how many careers disappeared after a simple no. Period. And Jamie wasn't the only one. Cube claimed 2 other actors went through the same thing. One of them called him in a panic, said he blacked out after midnight and woke up in a hotel room with a contract on the table. That's what it was about. It wasn't just parties, it was manipulation, extortion, psychological warfare. That's when Cube shifted the focus of the story. No longer about Jamie, Quincy, or the system. Now, it was about him. I went to one of those parties, he said. Just once, it was the early 2000s. No official invitation, no address. Just a name, a time, and a black SUV parked at the hotel entrance. They called it networking night. They always call it that. The car took him through the Hollywood Hills, down a winding road to a hidden mansion in Beverly Hills. The gate closed behind him with an overly loud click. His cell phone was confiscated at the entrance. No cameras, but there were eyes everywhere. Inside, it wasn't a party, it was a setup. Dim lights, no music, no laughter, no champagne. Just whispered voices and guards in every corner. The atmosphere was tense, somber. And then came the hallways, the unmarked doors, some ajar. Cube said he heard sounds. Strange sounds that didn't match the environment. Behind some doors, scenes he preferred not to describe. Famous faces appeared, but with empty expressions, lost gazes. Some scared, others lifeless. And then came the moment that marked his life. Turning down a hallway, he saw someone, an idol, slumped on a sofa, eyes open but soulless. In front of him, a camera on, silently recording, observing. Cube said nothing. He got back in the car, silent until the end of the ride. But it didn't end there. The next day, he received a call. No caller ID, no greeting, just one sentence. We saw you leave. No direct threat, no complaint. But Cube understood the message. It was clear. That night, he said to the jury, never left my mind. That wasn't a party, it was a trap. Then he looked at Diddy calmly. You didn't just destroy lives, you filmed them first. The silence in the room was deafening. Not even Diddy's lawyers dared to interrupt. Even they seemed speechless. Diddy, pale, jaw clenched, gaze lost in the void. For the first time, the cameras weren't under his control, and Cube still wasn't finished. They didn't just try to silence Jamie Foxx, he said. They tried to erase him, and he meant that literally. Cube explained that in Hollywood, silence is imposed methodically, not with shouted threats, but with a precise strategy, one that erases someone from collective memory without anyone noticing. After Jamie started to distance himself from Diddy's circle, everything fell apart, piece by piece. Roles disappeared, confirmed projects were mysteriously postponed, meetings canceled in a chain reaction. People he had worked with for years stopped answering his calls. Cube showed a document to the jury, a calendar displaying Jamie's commitments between 2019 and 2021. At first glance, it seemed like a normal industry hiatus, but then Cube showed what was behind it, revealing to the court an endless succession of canceled invitations, all linked to companies within the bad boy empire, Arista Records, or one of Diddy's myriad offshoots. Ice Cube left that document, open like a silent specter, concrete proof of the power operating in the shadows. And he didn't stop there. The whispers started in the blogs, articles insinuating Jamie was unstable, unpredictable, out of his mind. But he wasn't falling apart. He was breaking free, and that enraged them. Then came the health scare. Cube lowered his gaze, swallowed hard before asking the question that cut through the air. Do you really think it was natural? A man in peak physical condition just collapses on set right after questioning what he saw? He didn't need to name culprits. The weight of suspicion hung there, unequivocal. It wasn't a medical emergency, he explained. It was a warning. They offered Jamie a triumphant return. Movie roles, press tours, redemption stories. He just had to shake hands, smile, for the cameras and pretend nothing happened. But he refused. And that's when everything escalated. Rumors surfaced that he'd been replaced, cloning theories, rhetorical questions. Was it really him in the photos? Why was he hiding? Cube didn't call it a conspiracy, but a tactic. They dismantle you piece by piece until not even your fans know. What's real? He turned to the jury, eyes sharp. This isn't about music, it's not just parties, it's about control. Whoever pulls the strings shapes what we hear, what we fear, who we follow. Hollywood, according to Cube, isn't an industry. It's a machine. A cog that turns identity and trauma into commodities. And then came the most brutal warning. Who brought the sound of prisons to music? Well, now it's time to face prison. He, at quoting Tupac and his premonition before his voice was silenced. In that instant, the courtroom ceased to be a trial setting. It became an audience to a collective breakdown. Ice Cube detailed how those celebrations were actually secret tests, each party a filmed trial. Whoever followed orders was protected. Whoever dared to say no was punished. He spoke of a young singer, a rising star who refused to sign with the bad boy label. Within months, her name became synonymous with problematic. Her contract was pulled, her calls silenced, her face erased from screens. Coincidence? Cube challenged. I call it punishment. He posed the question that shook everyone. How many people not only consented but helped build that empire of silence? The judge leaned back. The room froze. Even the prosecutors seemed lost, bewildered. This was no longer a simple celebrity. It was the violent anatomy of a system protected by those who fed it. When asked for his final words, Cube rose with calculated steps, each one resonating on the wooden floor. He approached Diddy, looked at him without wavering. You built a kingdom on the silence of others. You called it success, but it was slavery. Diddy remained motionless, pale, dominated by a force that, for the first time, was not in his hands. Ice Cube continued firmly. You built emotional, psychological prisons, and you filled every cell with people who thought they were being celebrated. But they were being watched and used. His voice gained weight with each phrase. You broke people and then you filmed everything. Then he turned to the room, full of future artists. Before they hand you the keys to your dream, they'll ask for something in return. Sometimes your voice, your dignity, sometimes everything. And by the time you realize what you've lost, it'll be too late. For an instant, he fell silent. The first sincere fear of the day emerged in his confession. I was scared, because I knew what I saw, what I heard, where I was invited. I stayed silent, believing it would keep me safe. But silence doesn't protect. It only postpones the pain. At moment, Cube pulled an old photograph from his folder. Himself in 1991, full of hope and a sparkle in his eyes. He held it up to the ceiling, showed it to the jury. That me wouldn't believe me. And in a symbolic and definitive gesture, he tore the picture in half. But this one here, he said, pointing to himself, the man who came to testify today, is no longer afraid of any of you. The courtroom erupted in a sepulchral silence. Cube's words didn't just echo off the walls, they reverberated in everyone's conscience. It was no longer a trial. It was a funeral for the pact of silence that upheld power in the shadows. Ice Cube returned to the witness stand. Silently, carefully, almost ceremonially, he placed the torn photograph on the folder in front of him. Then he looked up at the judge. I don't know what you're going to do with all this, but you can no longer pretend you didn't hear it. Now, all of you know. He turned one last time towards Diddy. You thought no one would talk, that everyone was bought or buried. But the silence has been broken. And then he stepped down from the stand. He didn't look at the press, didn't seek a reaction from the jury. He walked down the central aisle with the calm of someone who had just laid down, piece by piece, a truth kept chained for years. And as he neared the exit, he turned his body slightly and fired off one last shot. They didn't kill Jamie and they didn't kill me. They just made us scream louder. And he left the room without looking back. But what he left behind wasn't just testimony. It was a warning sign, a blow to the structure, the beginning of a storm that none of those present in that courtroom would ever forget.